The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640.
Hi, and welcome to A View from Space. I'm the Spaceman, and welcome to the show that no one knows what time the start is. Yeah, I'm back to that moniker again, being the fall and hockey's started again. But I want to welcome you in. If you're listening right now, driving around town or at work listening to AM 640. I want to also welcome you in if you're dialed into Star Choice on Channel 865. Or if you're sitting in front of your Mac or your PC. Some say the best spot, bar none, to check out A View from Space. Logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. The Illuminati own and control the world's banking system and are now in the beginning stages of crashing it in order to bring in their new system that will replace it. The electronic funds transfer system, which will be the banking system used by the New World Order that's coming very soon. They will start with the American dollar. So that's where I'll start on what I'm calling the most historic weekend in the history of the great Freemasonic experiment called America, on tonight's episode of A View from Space on AM 640. The unbelievable breakdown in American lending standards, today's market instruments, are no more than a worthless pile of paper. Notice how the Illuminati are using this contrived market crash to put pressure on Congress to hustle, cajole, to hold for ransom the puppet senators, supposedly representing the taxpayer of America, to pass the plan to bail out the fraudster banking elite. As the frenzy peaked this past Thursday, as the debate over a $700 billion bank bailout rages on in Washington, and George W. held emergency meeting at the White House earlier this week with Obama and McCain to make it even more dramatic, to get involvement from the two fellas that are running for the next president of the United States of America, who will inherit this problem. One of the country's largest banks, as all this was going on at the White House, Washington Mutual Incorporated, collapsed. Yes, just another telephone call by the Illuminati to say, hustle it up, give them one more whack, show them that we really mean business. Washington Mutual, by the way, is pivotal. It's the 13th bank to fail so far this year. Just putting a mark of the cult on it. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation seized Washington Mutual and then sold its banking assets to that pirate, J.P. Morgan, Chase and Company, for $1.9 billion. They got over $10 billion worth of assets, not debt, assets, depositors, for $1.9 billion. What a fleece job. As a matter of fact, every single one has been a fleece job, going back to Bear Stearns. The acquisition is J.P. Morgan Chase's second major purchase this year, following the mid-March acquisition of investment bank Bear Stearns, if you'll remember that. A deal that was also engineered by the government. And what they got that for, a song. The FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, insures assets held by 8,451 banking institutions in America. That's a total of insured depositors of $13 trillion. Yes, the cults marked the number again. This deal to get Washington Mutual puts control of most of the credit card debt owed by Americans into the hands of J.P. Morgan Chase, now the largest bank in America. Second is the Jesuit-controlled Bank of America. Remember, it just bought Merrill Lynch. These two Illuminati-controlled giants control just about all the credit card debt in the United States after this Washington Mutual deal with J.P. Morgan Chase. I was talking about this long ago on A View from Space on AM 640, which is the next stage of this financial attack on America. It will be the credit card debt. Yes, it will. After it moves out of the financial arena of big major banks. And the message, of course, will be, pay up or you're cut off. Do you realize how many people in the world today, and in America, are living on credit cards? They don't have cash. They're in debt, and in debt very deeply. The credit card is getting them through their daily activities and food on their plate. That's how close this is to collapsing now. All of this really is akin to the Chicken Little story you were told as a kid. Remember, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. The sky is falling scenario has been playing out all this week. Embellished by reports of runs on Asian banks. China owns a lot of the U.S. debt, you see, and people were panicking to get their money out of those banks since they're all tied to the American debt. The vicious circle of printing more and more and more currency will only make the situation worse, and it is intended to do just that. There will be so much more bad news to come out after this bailout is passed sometime this weekend, probably Sunday night, just in time for the Asian markets opening. Maybe they'll even make it more dramatic and wait till Monday or Tuesday, the day they go to war. Yes, Tuesdays are always war days. But they will announce it either Sunday night, Monday, or Tuesday. But announce it they will. There is already a deal done. That's right. All of this is just posing, styling, standing up in Congress and holding this whole thing up, making it like, well, they don't want to do it, and they have to do it. Well, maybe they will, and maybe it'll be a tough fight, but yeah, they'll pass it. It's all just a show. It's already a done deal. Here's the definition of bailout, by the way. There are two entries in the dictionary for bailout. Number one doesn't apply. It's to parachute from an aircraft. But the second one exposes the whole fraudulent scheme. A bailout means to abandon a harmful or difficult situation. Also to leave or to depart. Let me repeat that. The words bailout means to abandon a harmful or difficult situation. Abandon it. Also to leave or to depart from it. Listen carefully to me here, because this is of paramount importance. Because the trigger phrase of the Illuminati reveals the true meaning of the black magic spell that's being cast all this week and through this weekend. And here it is. Bailout does not, I repeat, does not mean to fix the problem. It means to leave, to depart, to get away from, to run from. Spaceman, AM 640. On a view from space, just getting started. As it turns out, all the foreign nations holding dollar-denominated foreign exchange surplus reserves in the form of treasury paper realized that America was going to inflate their dollar into oblivion. Just keep printing more. What with all the bailouts and printing of more and more money, it appears that they all ran for the door at the same time. Everybody wanted out. The Illuminati wore out the printing presses trying to cash in on their bonds. And all that was left was a huge pile of treasury paper, which the Illuminati decided to throw out of Ben Bernanke's helicopter instead of cash. In any case, they couldn't print any more Federal Reserve notes on account of the printing press problem. And besides, the notes wouldn't have been good for anything but heating fuel anyway. Right after the helicopter's engines have shut down, you could hear the soldiers marching towards Iraq, remember? It was Helicopter Ben. Ben Bernanke, as an expert on the economic and political causes of the Great Depression, by the way, and an expert, a foremost expert on the crash of 29. That's why he was chosen to replace Sir Alan Greenspan at the head of the Federal Reserve, because he knows how to crash it good. On Milton Friedman's 90th birthday, November 8th, 2002, Ben Bernanke stated, "Let me end my talk by abusing slightly my status as an official representative of the Federal Reserve System. I would like to say to Milton and Anna regarding the Great Depression, you're right. We did it. We're very sorry. But thanks to you, we won't do it again." The couple whom Ben Bernanke is referring to, Milton and Anna, Milton Friedman and his co-author, Anna Schwartz, are the people. See, Friedman wrote a lot of articles and books on the Great Depression, which he called the Great Contraction, arguing that it had been caused by an ordinary financial shock whose duration and seriousness were greatly increased by the actions the Fed took. Contraction of the money supply, caused by the misguided policies, they say, of the directors of the Federal Reserve. Friedman once wrote, "If you want to see capitalism in action, go to Hong Kong." He believed the Hong Kong economy was the best example of a laissez-faire capitalist economy. Laissez-faire economy meaning the government does no intervening, has no rules. They just let the marketplace take it. The Federal Reserve was totally responsible for converting what might have been a garden variety recession, maybe a fairly severe one in 1929, into a major catastrophe. Instead of using its powers to offset the depression, it presided over a decline in the quantity of money. It cut it by 1/3. From the year 1929 to 1933. Far from the Depression of 29 being a failure of the free enterprise system, it was a contrived plot by the Illuminati to take their money out of the markets and out of the hands of the people and parking it on the sidelines. It gave rise to a global depression, then a global war, World War II. History always repeats itself. The Illuminati makes sure it does. As they say, there's nothing new under the sun. They just keep repeating over and over the same things, generation after generation, decade after decade. In 2002, when the word deflation began appearing in the business news, the definition of deflation, by the way, is a decline in general price levels, often caused by a reduction in the supply of money or credit. Deflation can also be brought about by direct contractions in spending, either in the form of a reduction of government spending, personal spending, or investment spending. Deflation has often had the side effect of increasing unemployment in an economy, since the process often leads to a lower level of demand in the economy. So, as I was saying, in 2002, Bernanke gave a speech about deflation. In that speech, he mentioned that the government, in a fiat money system, owns the physical means of creating money. Control of the means of production, for money implies that the government can always avoid deflation by simply printing more money. He referred to a statement made by Milton Friedman about using a helicopter drop of money into the economy to fight deflation. Bernanke's critics have since referred to him as his nickname, which is Helicopter Ben, because of that statement, or to his helicopter printing press. Yes, he said, how would I get out of a problem? I would spend my way out. I would print so much money, fill all my helicopters with cash, fly over the American cities and dump it out. He sort of meant it as a joke, but he was also sort of very serious. Space, back with more in a moment on AM 640.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640. I'm the guy they call Space. This is A View from Space at AM 640. A couple of email addresses for you. space@640toronto.com. The other is spaceman@640toronto.com. I was just on about how Ben Bernanke got his nickname, Helicopter Ben, about filling military helicopters full of American money after he printed it at the Federal Reserve, flying over American cities and dumping it out of the doors and spending his way out of trouble. And of course, everyone knows, it's so simple to figure out that if you print too much, you get inflation, meaning the value of your money falls. So that's all Ben Bernanke has been doing, is printing money. And it hasn't even been going out of the streets. It's just been going to the banks and sitting there. It's not going out the front door. It's coming in the back door, but wasn't going out the front door. Now it's frozen solid. As I told you last Saturday night, the Illuminati has taken $65 trillion out of the game and parked it on the sidelines. That's why everyone is strapped for cash and banks are failing. But you will not hear that on the Illuminati-controlled mass media. So that's where we sit. And Ben Bernanke cranking out more and more and more American greenbacks, driving down
its value. Which is exactly why they gave him the job to do that. So that they could have this contrived crash. Shortly after the helicopter bin speech in late 2002 on deflation, the Illuminati consulted with their newly set up Gestapo. You know it as the Department of Homeland Security. And they decided to send the stormtroopers into Iraq on March 19, 2003. This is now known as Gulf War II. This war was instrumental in his whole Crash America plan. Just look at the trouble the Illuminati went through to get it done. George W. and the Illuminati lied over 80-some times to the American people about the reasons for invading Iraq. The Bush administration broke 7 federal and international laws in the run-up to invading Iraq. And when the Illuminati decided to invade, George W. even overruled his own generals when they told him they'd need 500,000 troops, no less. The Illuminati work on many different levels at the same time. This war was not only used for getting the war on terror going strong after 9/11. Remember, the goal is to spend, spend, spend. And wars are, well, very expensive. It was also used as a distraction from these monstrous money problems that were being created. News stories of the Iraq War ate up all the television time, so it didn't get any time, even if there was a desire to talk about the money problems that were developing. Right to the Iraqi war footage they went. They also didn't want their citizens to realize or understand that the treasury bills they just dropped were nothing but a worthless heap of paper. They were apparently concerned that there might be mass social upheaval, possibly even a revolution, after the people found out about the truth. Space, AM 640. And a view from space. This $700 billion bailout plan proposed by the Fed Chairman Bernanke and Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson is the most abusive and corporate fascist scheme ever proposed. This is the living freaking end. All financial analysts are sitting stunned and stupefied at the sheer arrogance of a corporate fascist plan, so saturated with moral hazard that it can only be described as ludicrous. You can't fix a fundamentally flawed financial problem by getting taxpayers to pay the bill. When you do that, the problem doesn't go away. It's made bigger. It exasperates it. But then, that's what the Illuminati plan has been for the new Atlantis, called America, all along. The idea, you see, is to crash America so she is no longer the policeman of the world, so that she is no longer the economic engine of the world, which leaves a vacuum. What or who will take its place? Answer: the New World Order. So you see, out of the ashes of a burned-out economy and country called America, out of the ashes rises the new phoenix, the New World Order. Space, back with more on A View from Space on AM 640 in just a minute.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is a View from Space. It's AM 640. Just getting started. New time with the fall starting, which could be anywhere from 10:30 to 11 to 11:30. It's now that old moniker that I've been using for a few years now. It's the only radio show on the planet where no one knows what time it starts. Now back to this financial crisis. First, notice the elites have allowed the stock markets to crash over the past couple of days in order to put pressure on Congress to adopt their plan. Yeah, this is kind of dead in the water, not doing much. They withdraw all the credit to all the businesses, even the small guy, in an effort to stuff this plan down Congress's throat. And this pressure will continue until they get their way. Now, the senators will have to face their constituents in a no-win situation. If they adopt the plan, they'll be accused of bailing out the fraudsters and of privatizing the profits from the people's hard work in evil, elitist corporations, while socializing the losses from yet another banker's crazy scheme, as the people have often done, as is their custom. If they don't adopt the plan, and as a result the credit markets freeze up and the U.S. economy goes down in flames, as they say it will, they'll be blamed for that. Even though that is, we're told, is the only solution at this point to purge the system of its excesses. Most of the talking head experts you see on television will tell you that the American Congress has sat by and allowed financial debacles like this to happen time and time again in the last few years, when it was quite easily avoidable with all the checks and balances that they could have put in, with the slightest amount of regulation and oversight. That just shows you how completely and utterly controlled the politicians of today are. They could see it coming, but said nothing. And Congress appears to be balking, right? Claiming that they need more time to deliberate over this situation, to ponder potential alternative plans, or at the very least to modify the current proposal to make it more palatable to voters, which is impossible. No, this is merely a show. Just like the presidential primary debates, just like the presidential race that's going on now. A done deal. A foregone conclusion. The winner is already picked. Just as this whole charade playing out this week in Washington, D.C. is doing. Merely a show. An agonizing and gnashing of teeth display for the edification of the people of America only. It is just more posturing to make it look as though they aren't rolling over and playing dead for their Illuminati masters. These egotistical elitists want to give Hank Paulson carte blanche to pay the price for the bankers at its hold-to-maturity value with taxpayer funds, meaning you, the taxpayer of America, will pay for crap that is worth pennies on the dollar. Then the American taxpayer will get paid back in hyperinflated dollars on ever-deteriorating assets, with flagging real estate prices chipping away at their value without recovery for decades, if not forever. This, of course, means that the collateral on any of these no down payment, give him a loan of his breathing mortgages, will be impaired and next to useless in the event of default. And who's going to administer these loans and process these payments and deal with the defaults? The Illuminati. And what types of debt will be subject to the bailout? Americans will be taking on defaulted credit, default swaps, interest rate swaps, credit cards, corporate bonds, commercial paper, aircraft leases too, probably. They will solve the mortgage-backed securities problem temporarily, only to soon be run over by credit default and interest rate sweeps and other worthless paper that was equally steeped in fraud. The most egregious part of the proposed bailout is that it allows Hank Paulson, Secretary of Treasury, to dole out the funds and deal with the bad loans without any judicial oversight and with full immunity from any criminal prosecution. They made sure of that. They cover their asses. This means he can pay par with America's hard-earned money, and then when it becomes clear that the cesspool of paper is only worth a small fraction of par, he can pawn it off to his cronies at bargain basement prices. This way, any profits will be distributed to the Illuminati-controlled bankers as they see fit. And what do the American people end up with? Well, their national debt, which is now $48 trillion. Well, if you didn't know, let's put it in perspective. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollar pieces of paper. 1,000 billion dollar bills makes $1 trillion. They're in a $48 trillion debt. It's impossible to get out of. The interest rates alone skyrocketing. It's a moonshot. And how is this elitist bailout bonanza going to benefit the taxpayers or the American economy? It's not. As a matter of fact, it's only going to make things drastically worse, which exactly was the plan. Space, back with more on A View from Space on AM 640 in just a minute.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can on AM 640.
I'm Space, and this is A View from Space on AM 640. You can direct your emails, your thoughts, your questions, or if you have some information to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. So, this free trade thing and globalization, the global economy, has become a tripwire economy. One wrong move and the explosive device is detonated. Noticed lately? It can take out the entire financial global system in a blaze of shrapnel and glory. The whole house of fraudster cards, rife with trade and investment imbalances. It could easily collapse and get sucked into a gargantuan financial black hole. Yes, I said black hole. Listen for more deeper into the show tonight on A View from Space on AM 640 for the parallel between the banking crisis and the Large Hadron Collider at CERN that was switched on this past September 9th on the border of Switzerland and France, and in doing so, they say damaged the machine, which delayed its next experiment for a couple of months. You see, this is all code for what's about to happen soon. You'll recall the story. They said they were going to test the Large Hadron Collider, the largest in the world, 17-mile circumference. And they were going to smash a couple of atoms, looking for the God particle to take us back to the origin of the universe and the Big Bang. And they have cameras that are going to take 11,000 pictures in 1 second of the smash of the atoms. Trying to split atoms, of course, is what they're inferring. But that's not really what it's about at all. Let me just leave these 2 words with you, and I'll pick up this little story deeper, as I say, into the show tonight. They call it the Beast. Yes, it's all code for what's about to be taking place very soon. And it is involving the economy. It is involving banks. So keep it on AM 640 to listen for the Beast when I begin speaking about that. All of it will take only one nation whose citizens are fed up with rampant inflation. They will have to break the dollar pegs, cash in their U.S. Treasury bonds, and absorb the excess amounts of their domestic currencies by purchasing them from the dollars received as proceeds from the sale of their Treasury bonds. This strengthens their currency in foreign markets, and it moderates their inflationary problems. But then their exports suffer. What a game, huh? Meanwhile, the dollar starts to decline, and everyone else is afraid that this decline will continue and threaten the value of their reserves. So the mad dash for the front door begins, and not everyone can fit through the door at the same time. So the dollar gets destroyed, along with the U.S. economy, as the cash from dumped treasuries finds its way back into the U.S. through purchases of American assets by foreign nations that are looking desperately to dump their cash, thus creating hyperinflation on a huge scale. This happened with the German mark just before the Second World War. You see, this is why the Federal Trade Commission is no longer publishing stats on foreign investment in the United States. They want to hide this problem from the public as the dollars start pouring in, coming back to America, adding to global problems. Exporting nations whose goods are now no longer competitively priced go down like the RMS Titanic, which, by the way, was also owned by J.P. Morgan. Yeah, the pirate. In The Wind and the Lion, the Theodore Roosevelt book, he mockingly toasts J.P. Morgan, John Pierpont Morgan, of Morgan & Chase, which is named after him. He's dead now. And refers to him as, aside from the Razuli, the only real pirate I know. J.P. Morgan Chase filed a disclosure statement with the city of Chicago in 2005 on January 20th. You know what they acknowledged? That between 1831 and 1865, 2 of J.P. Morgan Chase's predecessor banks, Citizens Bank and Canal Bank in Louisiana, accepted... I want you to turn the radio up for this. No one knows about this. J.P. Morgan filed a disclosure statement in Chicago in 2005, January 20th, acknowledging that between 1831 and 1865, two of J.P. Morgan Chase's approximately 13,000 slaves were accepted as collateral for loans and ended up owning approximately 1,250 of those slaves as a result of defaults. J.P. Morgan is also widely credited with having saved or rescued the United States national economy in general and the federal government in particular on not one but two separate occasions in America's history. But it came with a very high price. He had taken control of the Federal Reserve completely. Most people think the Federal Reserve is a government agency. It is not. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation owned by the banks of Wall Street. Which out of the five, there are only two left. Space, back with more in a minute on AM 640. It's a view from space.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with a view from space on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640, and a view from space. Just been talking about J.P. Morgan, the guy Theodore Roosevelt referred to as the only real pirate I know. That's the namesake of J.P. Morgan Chase. And then, of course, there was the disclosure statement I was just speaking about, released in 2005. J.P. Morgan's predecessor bank, Citizen and Canal Bank, Louisiana, accepted 13,000 people, slaves, as collateral for loans and ended up owning over 1,250 of them because of the defaults on the loans. Oh, I can't pay, have all these people. Can you imagine? And of course, J.P. Morgan is just, well, got everything they've touched for a song. Bear Stearns, and now their latest acquisition. It's absolutely... Washington Mutual, by the way, had a lot of credit card debt that is now owned by J.P. Morgan, the former banker who took people as collateral. Not a problem. So you can imagine how nice he's going to be when they call in the credit card debt, or his company. As I said, John Pierpont Morgan is now deceased. And as I said, he's down in history as rescuing the national economy of the United States not once but twice. With loans, of course, to the Federal Reserve. But it came with one hell of a steep price. He took control of the Federal Reserve completely. Now look where they are. Trouble aplenty. The United States operates as a deficit, spending more money than they make from their own production and needs foreigners to finance the difference. In order to help finance this deficit, these foreigners buy treasury paper with all the excess dollars they obtain from their trade with the U.S. They do this by having their central banks print more of their domestic currency to absorb the dollar forex, which is flooding their economies due to trade imbalances with the U.S. The central banks simply print more money of their own currency, which is then used in economies and currency exchanges to soak up that dollar forex. This process inflates the economy by dumping their own currency on the domestic markets while bidding up dollars, which are then used to purchase treasuries. What a vicious circle, going nowhere. While those dollars are parked in treasuries, they do little harm to U.S. citizens via inflation, although Americans do have to pay interest on them. The foreign nations then enjoy a competitive price on their exports to the U.S. because of their artificially weakened currency. But at the expense of their own currency's inflation. This system perpetuates the trade imbalances and the inflation in the foreign nations. Obviously, this can't go on forever, this little wheel of indebtedness. And it will not. And now, all these wild, lunatic bailouts will threaten the entire world economy. Why? Because the United States is dumping more bucks into the world economy, devaluing their currency, therefore devaluing all of the foreign-owned U.S. Treasury bonds. Imagine what will happen when $700 billion in cash is dumped into the fraudster system after the deal done this weekend. If the fraudsters start lending it again, that means the fractional banking multiplier, which usually runs at 7 to 8 times reserves, will then generate $5 to $6 trillion of new money and credit, an amount that would swamp the U.S. and global financial systems, even if the Fed shut off its money and credit spigot completely. And who would they lend all this money to? The overextended, totally broke, unemployed, underemployed people who are being hyperinflated into oblivion? Is that who's going to borrow this? People who couldn't pay it back again anyway? Of course not. It'll be used for more wild speculation and to produce more leverage and more fraud and more worthless paper, which will add yet more money and credit to the already waterlogged, or should I say dollar-logged system. The inevitable outcome? A crash of the cash system as we know it around the world, every currency. The Russian ruble, the euro, the Canadian dollar, the Aussie dollar, the Hong Kong dollar, the yen, the yuan. Precisely the plan concocted by the Illuminati. Crash all cash systems. And just because there are losses does not mean that this $700 billion bailout will be absorbed by those losses. The money that was used to produce the assets which suffered those losses is still in the system, but not where the elitists wanted it to be parked. Space, back with more. AM 640 in just a minute.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with a view from space on AM 640.
I'm the guy they call Space. This is View from Space. That's all it is on AM 640. Come on, it's time to go. There is no pain. You are receding. A distant ship, smoke on the horizon. You're only coming through in waves. Your lips move, but I can't hear what you're saying. When I was a child, I caught a fleeting glimpse out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look, but it was gone. I cannot put my finger on it now. The child is grown. The dream is gone. I have become comfortably numb. The words of Pink Floyd. Off the Wall. Song, Comfortably Numb. I think it's about the world getting a fleeting glimpse of our former glory and greatness. And they wake up and stop allowing the lies to go on. Because the dream's over. The American dream. It never existed. It was a scam. See, when the United States of America was founded prior to the Declaration of the Independence, it was a colony of England. There were many people who arrived on this continent with hopes of beginning a new life. A lot of them were fleeing Europeans from debts or from crimes. What I'm saying is that many of them were considered criminal. Benjamin Franklin, in moving to England for a visit, said once that the colonies were profiting because they only minted as much money as they needed and because they minted their own money. Benjamin Franklin was working for the Rothschilds, the banking elitists of Europe. And also, he told this to the Rothschilds when he visited England that time. The Rothschilds then directed King George not to allow any colonies to mint their own money. All colonies were to use the British currency. This led to the Revolutionary War. The country of England had been taken over through its indebtedness due to the war with Spain, the indebtedness being to the Rothschilds' banking system, which was in collaboration with the Illuminati. And it has remained that way since that time. James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, along with others like Lafayette and George Washington and Benjamin Franklin in particular, were aware of the banking controls and the manipulation of nations by the Rothschilds' banking system. Here's a very quick tutorial on the Rothschilds' banking system and how they took over Britain. One of Rothschild's couriers, a man named Rothworth, after gathering the news that the British had won the Battle of Waterloo and Napoleon had fallen, he takes off for England and delivers his news to Nathan Mayer Rothschild a full 24 hours before Wellington's own courier reaches England to say the news. One whole day before. Nathan Mayer Rothschild quickly enters the stock exchange upon hearing the news from his courier, Rothworth. And he instructs all of his workers to start selling bonds, as we know them today. They were called consols then. Start selling them. Due to Rothschild's reputation for being one step ahead when it came to information, the other traders panicked, thinking the British had lost the war with Napoleon, and started selling the bonds frenetically. As a result, the bonds, as we know them today, plummeted in value, at which point Nathan Mayer Rothschild discreetly instructs his workers to purchase all those bonds, and every single one that they can lay their hands on. So when the news finally does come through, with Wellington's own courier finally arriving in Britain, they find out that the British had actually won the war. And the bonds rocketed up to a level even higher than ever before the war started, leaving Nathan Mayer Rothschild with a return of approximately 20-1 on his investment. In fact, Nathan Rothschild openly bragged that in his 17 years in England, he had increased his initial £20,000 stake given to him by his father 2,500 times, to a neat sum of 50 million pounds. How about that for insider knowledge? For this reason, the Constitution, in attempting to guarantee freedoms for individuals, was put together with three branches: the executive in America, the legislative, and the judicial branch, in order to divide the power among the three branches. These people should have created a financial branch, a fourth branch, which then would have been controlled by the people. But they failed to do it because the Founding Fathers were Illuminati controlled. Rather, they had the Constitution so written that Congress would control the money. Congress not only had the right to mint and coin money, but also had the right to legislate and make laws. This allowed Congress to be manipulated at a future time into giving away or voting away its right to control the money. It was turned over to the Federal Reserve Bank, with J.P. Morgan and his buddies. In 1895, at the depths of the Panic of 1893, the Federal Treasury was nearly out of gold. The then President Grover Cleveland arranged for J.P. Morgan to create a private syndicate on Wall Street to supply the U.S. Treasury with $65 million worth of gold, half of it from Europe. This was a loan from J.P. Morgan to the Federal Treasury of the United States of America. So they supplied them with $65 million worth of gold, half of it from Europe, to float a bond issue that restored the Treasury surplus of $100 million. The episode saved the Treasury, but turned the Federal Reserve over to the bankers. There goes the American people's only opportunity to run their own monetary system. Up next, the Lincoln conspiracy. Yes, Abraham Lincoln figures heavily into this way back when. And Barack Obama is his incarnate today. Space, back with more on AM 640 in just a moment.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the guy they call Space. It's View from Space on AM 640. You can email me at spaceman@640toronto.com, or the other address is spaceman@640toronto.com. The Lincoln conspiracy. Abraham was faced with a need to finance his troops for the Civil War. The Civil War itself was staged. What? Yes, the Civil War itself was staged and set up by the Illuminati, whereby they brought the slaves from Africa in Dutch ships to the southern plantations in the United States, the new colony, in order to create an atmosphere that would lead to a problem which could be used for setting up a war which would divide the nation. Because if you'll recall, quite often on A View from Space on AM 640, I bring up the Hegelian dialectic, one of the greatest moves ever invented by the Illuminati. It's George Hegel that's named after. And George Hegel had the idea, in order to cause chaos, you have to pit one against another. So you can do black versus white, say, or you can do male versus female. And you just goad them into fighting with one another. And once you've got the chaos happening, then you can step in as a third party and take control of the situation and be the mediator, make the laws. Because you see, through chaos comes change. Through change comes the New World Order as you make each change closer and closer to a one world government, a central government to lead all men. That's their goal. So they were bringing in the blacks for slaves on the southern plantations to create a problem would be used for dividing the nation. The newspapers, being controlled by the Illuminati, began to build up the background and the attitude among the Northerners to set the stage for the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, attempting to finance his troops, sought money from the banks and was told that it would cost at least 26% interest. He then turned to the Constitution and printed the Lincoln greenbacks, which were used for financing his army. He began printing his own money. Now you know why this guy caught a bullet. Alexander II of the Romanov dynasty, the then Tsar of Russia, prevented France and England from invading the United States during that Civil War. See, during this time, the British and the French, both being controlled by the Illuminati, prepared to invade the U.S. The Tsar of Russia, Alexander II, who was a good friend of Abraham Lincoln, by the way, warned these two nations that they would be forced to fight Russia if they invaded the United States. This prevented that from occurring. And the Union Army won the Civil War. This then led the Illuminati to its prepared efforts to take over America through the banking process of the Federal Reserve System and to take over the Russian Empire through its planned evolutionary war also. As you'll recall, the Romanovs were the last of the czars before the communists took over, which was elite Illuminati setup. The Rockefellers and other bankers set up the Illuminati-planned Federal Reserve banking system also. In 1905, Henry Morgan, Paul Warburg, Nelson Aldrich, a senator from New York State, these three, along with Jacob Schiff, John D. Rockefeller, and several other members, went secretly by train, then by boat, to Jekyll Island. And they met there for some time, discussing a plan for an economic system that would allow the banking establishment to control the money of America. These men developed a program which was already written by the Illuminati. Yes, they just developed a program that was already prepared by the Illuminati and presented by Paul Warburg and adapted it to the needs of their purposes. This was presented as the Aldrich Plan. The majority of members of Congress objected, knowing that Aldrich worked for the Wall Street bankers, and objected to the plan, feeling that this would not be to the benefit of the American people. So the guys returned back to Jekyll Island and worked on an alternative plan. They called this plan the People's Plan. This became the Federal Reserve System. These men then had this Federal Reserve System passed in Congress on Christmas Eve, when most of the Congress had already left to go home to celebrate the holiday with their family and friends, except for those few working with them, who passed this Federal Reserve Plan. This was intended to prevent any further run on banks, they said, or any form of crisis in the economies of the country. In 1929, the crash came, and the banks collected 9/10 of all personal property on default of mortgages. Nelson Rockefeller's name, after the Senator Nelson Aldrich, and his brother David, during the 40s, served as assistants to the Chase Manhattan Bank and its different interests. They also assisted in setting up that which was known as the Pacific Institute of Research. This was set up in Japan. This Pacific Institute was used to create certain political influences in Japan, which helped to polarize the Japanese interests against the interests of the United States, and, of course, with a classic Hegelian dialectic, set the stage for World War II in the Pacific, pitting the U.S. versus the Japanese. And guess who is buying into Morgan Stanley? Mitsubishi, the Japanese bank and industrial complex that made the Zero aircraft that bombed Pearl Harbor. Yeah. With the assistance of President Franklin Roosevelt, John D. Rockefeller, and the empire built by him were financed after the Civil War by the European powers of the Rothschilds. And these forces were allowed to grow and build during World War II into what became the most powerful banking and financial interest in the entire world. That's whose money has built up China and the Asian countries. South Korea, Taiwan. The Rockefeller-Rothschilds connection sold war machines to Russia also, and set their relatives up in very high governmental positions. After World War II was completed, finished by the Illuminati, it will take 3 world wars, by the way, to bring about the New World Order. After World War II was completed, Rockefellers assisted in selling all of the machinery, the war machinery, to Russia and China, this allowing these nations to build up their industrial war machine and to industrialize to a high capacity in order that they might become a greater power, of course. The Rockefellers sold this, arranged the sale of this to the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds being in control of Russia and China and the communist forces, and therefore in turn the countries. The Rockefellers began to gain greater and greater control over this present United States government. Allen Dulles, being Rockefeller's cousin, was put in charge of the CIA. John Foster Dulles, his brother, another cousin, was the Secretary of State. This began the movement toward the greater power of the United States being controlled by the banking system, and the usurping of power from the hands of the people, that being the government then. The power of government had been taken from the people, and this led to what has become the secret government which now controls the United States. And it has, from the time of World War II right up to today. That tells you something, if you're paying attention. I'll be back with that in a moment. It's about the Cold War that's about to return. Space, and A View from Space, is on AM 640. Back in a minute.
He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Yeah, I'm the guy they call Space. It's View from Space. You can get in touch with me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. This is A View from Space on AM 640. Yes, the Cold War, then between Russia and the U.S., was simply a chess game concocted between the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers as a kind of mind mass manipulation to lead the world government that's being put into place even now. There appeared to be competition between these two controlling families, these banking interests. And this competition was real. Yet there was also that complete respect and the mutual cooperation that was underlying a lot of the surface competition. Just take for a moment and think about that Cold War when it was going on, if you're old enough to recall. What you had was what they called the space race as well as the nuclear buildup. But the space race was all about trying to put a man on the moon first. At first, actually, just trying to put a man into orbit and go once around the Earth. But all the while, the Russian space program focused on one thing, and one thing alone, and that was to go out and see how long they could sit out there and stay alive before they'd have to bring the cosmonaut back. The Americans worked on the half-ton truck, something that they could get up there and down, up and down, the ladder. Now, if you put the two together, the Americans with the half-ton trucking the stuff up there, and the Russians focusing on sitting out there, you'll notice that all of the research was spent on two different areas, and neither overlapped. So no one was trying to perfect the same thing. But when you put them both together, you have one complete space program, which is what the International Space Station is all about. A sort of control room in the sky for weather control, for satellite control, for spying. I mean, who knows how many things are involved with the International Space Station. And with that Cold War, there were also some certain movements when the competition between these two cost lives of the others. But from the viewpoint of the two Illuminati families, this was simply part of the financial game. Sometimes people had to die. The efforts of the Rothschilds to force the United States into Vietnam was partly the cooperation of the Rockefellers and the Kennedys. As you'll recall, Jack Kennedy was the first and only Catholic ever to hold the office of the presidency of the United States. Due to the desire of the Rothschilds to have greater control in Southeast Asia is the reason why they wanted to get into Vietnam. They were expanding their boundaries. This is in part relating to the lucrative opium market within the Golden Triangle area in China, and in part to an effort to use the military supplies of the United States up, as well as to drive them deeply into debt, because that war in Vietnam cost them trillions. It drove them into a heavy, heavy debt, on the way to bankrupting America, the same way Britain had been bankrupted by the Spanish War in the 18th century. Same plan. Again, nothing new under the sun. Spaceman, AM 640 in A View from Space. This is all part of the Illuminati plan for the New World Order to bankrupt all countries and turn them into satellites by foreclosing on the bankrupt country. There are things happening behind the scenes that could yet prevent them from their goals and dreams. But it's a long shot. And there is nothing simple or easy about it. America has a chance. America must have a leader with backbone to stand up against the Illuminati. Last chance coming up in the 2008 election. And you already know who the two are running. Which one has that backbone? Space, AM 640, with A View from Space, back in a minute.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is View from Space on AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. A couple of addresses for you. DL writes, Space, listening to your show last week, I thought you'd like this. Catalyst is one of the foremost international internet technology conferences. Keynote speaker coming up will be none other than Nick Leeson. All right. If you weren't listening to last week's show, you missed how $65 trillion was taken out of the world's economy. Nick Leeson was one of the guys that I was talking about. He's a former derivatives trader whose unsupervised speculative trading caused the collapse of Barings Bank, the United Kingdom's oldest investment bank. And he was given a cushy job after a few months in a slammer. Not very long. And he lost millions of pounds. And, of course, as a consequence, Barings went under. He was one of the people that was hired by the Illuminati to make sure stuff like this happened. So Nick Leeson is on the lecture circuit. Big bucks there. But then the Illuminati always take care of their soldiers. Until they don't need them anymore. So yes, the Illuminati plan for the New World Order is to bankrupt all countries, turn them into satellites, foreclose on the bankrupt country, take it over. That's what they're doing everywhere they go. And America has one last shot, as I see it. They've got to have a leader with a backbone to stand up against the Illuminati. And if you get in their way, they'll kill you. I wonder who that will be. And I wonder if one of those people that is running for the presidency of the United States in a few weeks has that kind of backbone. Because it's imperative. Time is running out. That's why you hear the talking head experts say this is America's last chance. There's only one bullet left in the gun. This last plan has to be gotten right the first time, because there will be no second chance. Do they have such a leader in Barack Obama or John McCain? This is why the 2008 presidential election is seen as the most important in their entire history. It's actually kind of a covert war going on all over the globe right now as to who is going to be free and who is going to be in control of the masses, whether they eventually will wake up enough to throw off the oppressors, or whether they will cuddle up to the Illuminati, hoping to seduce them into being nice to their slaves. The present situation shackling the United States economy they're suffering under now relates to their time in the mid-60s, when silver was taken, the silver backing was taken from the dollar. It was just shortly after that a peculiar thing occurred which few people are aware of, but which had a profound effect on history in general. In 1969, a person who was remotely related to the Rothschilds went to Europe and met with a few bankers in some small countries. These being independent bankers, not associated with the Rothschild Illuminati set. This person began explaining a technique whereby the bankers could effectively seize all of the gold. The Illuminati had already seized most of the gold. The Rothschilds banks, along with the Rockefeller banks, had taken most of it, and silver too, from circulation, and held it in their control. At this point in history, in 1969, it was still possible to buy gold at $32 an ounce. This Rothschild family member, in a meeting with the bankers of 16 nations, small nations, presented a plan whereby they could rake off some of the gold as well as making a large profit. Here's how the plan went. They would purchase gold at a price of $32 an ounce, then take that gold, or its certificate of ownership, and mortgage that at exactly the same amount, $32 per ounce. They could then mortgage this gold right back to the bank which sold the gold to them. They would then take the money from the mortgage and purchase more gold at $32 an ounce, mortgage that at 100% value, and then again purchase more gold. Repeating this method over and over, the bankers and money speculators began to drain off the ownership of gold, with the possibility of redeeming that gold which was being tied up by the mortgage, redeeming this at $32 an ounce. This continued on a gigantic scale, and the gold, which was tied up suddenly, began to be tied up into the banks of other nations, and these nations having mortgages which allowed them to redeem this gold at $32 an ounce. After a short amount of time passed, the price of gold became quite valuable in different countries. Then, President Richard Nixon made the announcement that he would put an end to the gold speculators and their efforts to destroy the American dollar by taking the gold backing off the dollar. When this happened, the price of gold shot upwards to its present rate, which is, at the close on Friday, was $877.80 an ounce. Those nations, which had then invested in gold, mortgaged that gold at $32 an ounce, could then redeem this $32 per ounce and resell at the current value, which, as I said, is $877.80 an ounce, making an absolute killing. And that's how it goes. Spaceman back with more in a moment. This is A View from Space on AM 640.
The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
On Space, it's A View from Space on AM 640. Here's how the Illuminati are bringing America down. They're going to eat multiple trillions of dollars from each of these areas. Number one, the phony war on terror. Number two, the loss in real estate values caused by record inventories that will be created by defaults and foreclosures, of course, resulting from rampant unemployment, loan fraud, over-leveraged consumers, and arm and option arm resets. 3, the combined bailout of phony and Fraudie's share, or should I say Fannie and Freddie's share, of the defaulted mortgages contained in the approximately half of all the U.S. mortgages, which these cesspools have made or insured, plus the losses from the Resolution Trust Company 2 bailout, which is the one that they're talking about now, from all of that worthless paper from the remaining half of U.S. mortgages. Looks like Fannie and Freddie is going to cost them $5 trillion. And they're only asking for a $700 billion fix this weekend. Can you imagine? What a joke. And here's multiple trillions of dollars in another area that they're going to have to eat, the taxpayer of America, the shortage in the FDIC's insurance reserves that will be generated by losses incurred on accounts of where what will be anywhere from, I would say we've had 13 banks go down now. I can tell you this. Washington Mutual wasn't the last bank to go bankrupt in America. There will be, I bet you, anywhere from 1,000 bank failures and maybe more. That was even suggested by Wilbur Ross, one of the billionaires in America. Maybe half of all banks in the U.S. will go under soon. As recently suggested by Ken Lewis, the CEO of Bank of America. And this is the tough one, the PBGCs. That's the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. Funding storage to cover losses suffered by pension plan beneficiaries on account of pension underfunded caused by what will be the loss of as much as half, maybe, of the value of all U.S. equity shares. Yes, there will be if you're in debt, there is no pension for you. Do you believe for a moment that when you retire, the government is going to be able to afford a pension for you? You're mistaken. No one should ever depend on the government to take care of you. Here's another place where the taxpayer of America will eat trillions of dollars. The bailouts that are likely to occur when the credit default swaps and interest rate swaps along with the entire bond market go under, in what will be the greatest bear market of all time in both bonds and derivatives, which are guaranteed to occur based on the hyperinflation that will be caused by all the other bailouts, as well as by the continually burgeoning budget and trade deficits. The resulting double-digit interest rates, which will become necessary in order to combat inflation and to properly reward risk, which are about to escalate in astronomical fashion, and to attract foreign investment, which will soon drop off to zero based on the negative rates of return. Here's another spot American taxpayers will eat multiple trillions of dollars from the loss in purchasing power due to hyperinflation generated by the steps I've just talked about. And they're going to eat trillions in the new wars for profit that will be started in order to restart America's vaporized economy in the wake of the death and destruction caused by this cash crisis. And you can also add in the costs associated with potential social unrest and revolution that are almost certain to occur. I'm talking about anarchy here. Martial law could be just around the corner in America. When the bailouts that are likely to occur, when the credit default swaps and interest rate swaps, along with the entire bond market, go under, in what will be the greatest bear market of all time in both bonds and derivatives, which are guaranteed to occur based on the hyperinflation coming to fruition. The entire world economy will implode and go into deep depression, exactly as planned. No one will escape the coming judgment of losses when the glowing quadrillion-dollar derivative Death Star goes supernova. The entire world economy will get sucked into the resulting financial black hole. And remember the Large Hadron Collider that was turned on September 9th? Has a whole lot to do with it. And I'll be speaking about it in a few moments from now. Spaceman back with more on A View from Space in AM 640 in just a minute.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with A View from Space on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640. And A View from Space, you can email me at a couple of locations. Space at 640toronto.com is one of them. And Spaceman at 640toronto.com is the other. Oh, yes. They're calling this the Resolution Trust Company 2. It'll be rammed down the throats of Congress through this weekend. As I was saying earlier on this show tonight, possibly by late Sunday, just in time for the markets in Asia to open up. And they will have their temporary fix in place, which will stop run on the banks in Asia. Or will it? Maybe they don't get it done until Monday. Maybe they pick Tuesday, the war day. Yeah, all business is done on Tuesdays. Haven't you noticed that Apple Computer always does their new product announcements and all of their brand new product shows? Their new product, they always do it on Tuesdays. Always. Microsoft also does computer updates for your computer on Tuesdays. That's the day they go to war. That's war day. Yeah, it'll be rammed down the throats of the congressmen as they gag and try to regurgitate it up, but will eventually go along with it. Just like the Federal Reserve Act was jammed through and was used to inflate the middle class right out of its wealth by imposing a stealth tax, which is used to fund their government spending and enrich private bankers with their debt-based fractional reserve system of banking. And the passage of the United States income tax, which is used to enslave and impoverish American citizens and to ensure payment of the U.S. Treasury's debt to the Federal Reserve on its Treasury paper. And the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act by the Graham-Leach-Biley Act, which is what paved the way for the speculation, the fraud, and the conflicts of interest that always arise when commercial banks and investment banks are allowed to be merged under one entity. And we just saw that happen with Bank America when it bought out Merrill Lynch. And this poisonous piece of legislation is what allowed the Illuminati bankers to pawn off the worthless paper which their investment banking division created for this investment banking client of theirs, after getting fraudulent AAA ratings from the ratings agencies on their hapless, sucker-duped commercial banking clients. Oh, and then there's the passage of the Toxic Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which freed the then fledgling OTC derivatives market, including credit default swaps and interest rate swaps, from the regulatory power of both the SEC and the CFTC, leading to an out-of-control, unregulated, uncollateralized, quadrillion-dollar volcano of smoldering molten risk that no one understands. Its interrelationships and its counterparty risks, and now these financial weapons of mass destruction threaten the worldwide financial system. And it was all planned this way. They also had the passage of the Iran war resolution based on George W.'s administration's lies regarding Hussein's supposed weapons of mass destruction and involvement in 9/11, which has led us into yet another bloody war for profit under the guise of security, democracy, freedom, which has resulted in the killing of millions of Iraqi civilians and thousands of American soldiers. And then there's the approval of both Patriot Acts to help fight the evil Osama bin Laden and that phony war on terrorism they got going on, while they dismantled the citizens' constitutional rights. Here's another way they're taking America down: the approval of the Military Commissions Act, which makes all dissenters into enemy combatants and takes away their right to habeas corpus. That's the passage of the John W. Warner Defense Authorization Act of 2006, which repeals posse comitatus, meaning, in plain, simple terms, that your United States military can now be used against its own citizens to police them for the first time in their history, and contrary, of course, to their Constitution. And you know why that was done? We're talking anarchy soon in America. Revolution in the streets because of what's going to happen to their economy. It is not getting better. $700 billion deal made over the weekend isn't fixing anything. It's exasperating things, making it worse. So they've got their work cut out for them. These two that are running for the office of the presidency of the United States of America, Barack Obama and John McCain. Space, back with more in a minute on AM 640 on A View from Space.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
The guy they call Space, it's A View from Space on AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I want to thank you all for the emails that I've received so far tonight. As you know, I've stated before that I can't get to every single email simply because I'm one person and there's just too much traffic to keep up with, as well as other duties that I have here at this radio station. So, which is another reason why there is no website for this show. So tonight I've talked about the plan to bankrupt all the countries in the world. That's the plan the Illuminati has for the world, to set up their new world order. That's what they do. They go in, they get a country into debt, get a hold of the monetary system through prices. The price of oil is very good to manipulate an economy. Pretty soon you can end up with the entire country as your own, which has pretty much been what's been going on. And, of course, with the mass-controlled media controlled by the Illuminati, it's very easy to see how we can only get one side of it. And if you really don't do any checking, you really never find out that, wow, we could be the bad guys. You ever think about that? America might be the problem. Because George W. was certainly given this job of being their 43rd president to stir up a lot of commotion. And you got to admit he did a hell of a job of it. He's got everybody in the world hating America. He's got them helplessly and hopelessly in debt. None of his party will have anything to do with him. They're trying to distance themselves as far as they can from the guy. We're talking about a loser that no one wants to be around. Yet he has that air of entitlement about him, even if you've seen him this week. Because, you see, that is the Illuminati way. They are entitled. And you don't even know what's good for you. Only they do. And what's good for you is a new world order. What's good for you is for someone else to make all your decisions for you. Because you're not quite capable of doing that. So they're going to have to do that for you. So Hank Paulson, who is the point man for the Illuminati on this $700 billion bailout, which will not fix anything, it simply is going to make it worse. He wants to give the Federal Reserve sweeping regulatory power over this new group of behemoths they have now created who will control everything, while occasionally allowing crumbs to fall off their table for the little guys to gobble up. And there will be far fewer of the little guys to worry about after the carnage in the banking sector is finally settled. Gold and silver went on a moonshot this week, with gold setting an all-time record for a one-day increase in value. This is what happens when you keep pressing on the lid of a pressure cooker, trying to keep boiling molten precious metals from escaping. Aiding gold and silver was the unraveling of longs in the metal in the United States DX futures market, which were forced to cover because they had pushed the dollar as far as it could go. Suddenly, the 93,701 contracts of open interest on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, reduced to 52,000, cut in virtually half. That means the dollar rally is over in America, and the ever more desperate bailouts are going to undermine confidence in that dollar. Soon all these trillions in bailouts will lead to a downgrade of their treasuries, as the debt load will soon reach unsustainable levels. Now, no matter how much the plunge protection team tries to manipulate the markets, I mean, the stupidest person in the room should be able to figure that out. The plunge protection team, you've heard of it? Never? It was created by executive order number 12631, signed in March 18th of 1988 by the then United States President Ronald Reagan. You know what an executive order is, don't you? A president can make up an order, pass it into law, to just change something. And the plunge protection team was enacted by an executive order, as I said, 12631. By the way, 12631 equals the cult number 13. Cleverly concealed by former President Ronald Reagan. That group, the Plunge Protection Team, was established explicitly in response to the events in the financial markets surrounding October 19th, 1987, a very famous, known as Black Monday. And stock markets are shooting up and down with unprecedented volatility, bobbing and weaving like a drunken sailor, as the plunge protection team tries to fight the gravity created by the financial black hole, created by the collapse of the bailout Death Star, and the total lack of confidence of market players who are finally starting to realize that CEOs, Treasury Secretaries, federal chairmen are pretty much just pathological liars. And the markets are rigged in ways that make China and Russia green with envy. Do you really think the markets are rallying because everyone is impressed with the new string of bailouts? See, all the pros know where this is leading us, and they're deleveraging. If you want to know why the markets are rallying, besides tens of billions of dollars being unleashed from the repo pool for insidious and in-your-face manipulations, check out the yen. I'm back with that next on AM 640. This is A View from Space. Back with more in a minute.
He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640, and A View from Space. You want to contact me at spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. I was just asking you if you really thought the stock markets, were rallying because everyone is impressed with the new string of bailouts. Well, like I said, the guys who really know what's going on, they know what's happening. And it's all about this. 9 o'clock in the morning, this past Wednesday, the yen was a super yen at 103 yen per dollar and 147 yen per euro. Now, suddenly, despite the dollar crash, the yen has wimped out. As of 2:25 p.m. on Friday afternoon, it stood at 107 against the dollar and 154 against the euro. So, your rally mystery? Solved. Now, I remarked earlier on the show tonight on View from Space on AM 640 that I would be talking about the beast. The Illuminati believe they are sired from a race of extraterrestrials from another planet. The planet was known as Maldek, a planet belonging to our solar system, they said, which was destroyed. This is how the Illuminati explained the Milky Way, by the way. It's supposedly the remnants of a planet that was at one time destroyed by a cataclysmic explosion. And the inhabitants had to, of course, evacuate. And they came here. So the Illuminati believe. And they believe in one of their past lives, because they believe in reincarnation. They actually had lived on Maldek. And this is the Luciferian consciousness which is being worked off as part of Earth's karma. They have been told by the Watchers, as they're known, that Earth's karma is almost totally dissolved, which ties into the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, December 21st. They believe the entire Illuminati money-changing trip is but a replay of the memory of the action which occurred on Maldek, where beings were categorized, numbered, and enslaved. The movement, which began some 60,000 years ago in Atlantis, was but a recollection of certain states which began on Maldek, the planet that is no more, that was in our solar system, supposedly. That the Milky Way is now the remnants of its destruction. There are many things happening in today's world. Maybe even you can feel it. It's as though things are speeding up toward a frantic climax. There are things upcoming and things presently occurring that can best be understood with a background or foundation that is yet to be clarified. What I'm talking about is who we are, where we came from, is what the Illuminati is going to educate us on. That's a quiet war that is now going on. I have breaking news here on AM 640 on A View from Space via email of one of my listeners. Let me call him Big D. He writes, "It's done, Space. Congressional lawmakers say a breakthrough has been reached on a proposed economic bailout deal. So, got to it very early, didn't they? All in time for the markets to open in Asia Sunday evening. So they'll have it all laid out, and everybody will be up to speed on it through Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. But I want to talk about the quiet war that is going on right now. It's a different kind of war than what most people think of when they hear the word war. It's essentially a quiet war. It's a war that takes place in many different battlefields. It occurs occasionally with some form of explosion, like the World Trade Center attack, or the London bombings of 7/77, or the Madrid 3/11 train bombing, or the Oklahoma City bombing, or explosions like that, the one at the Marriott in Pakistan not long ago. Did you ever notice the Marriott is always in the middle of these hotel explosions? Marriott is wholly owned. It's the only hotel chain, worldwide hotel chain, that is owned by a family. And the Marriott chain is owned by the Mormons of Utah. You'll find the Smith Bible, the Mormon Bible, in every room at the Marriott. And they're always involved in the bombings. So there's the Illuminati inside job working neatly there. It's always the same group, Marriott, that had the explosions. Watch for the next one. The Mormons, of course, run by Hinckley for years, decorated with the highest honor just a couple of years ago before he died by George W. in the Oval Office, giving him the Civilian Award, the highest award a civilian can get from the government. And there's another family member, John Hinckley Jr., remember? Who belongs to that family and was donated for the cause. He pretty much gave up his whole life to sit in jail after he straightened Ronald Reagan out and made sure that he read the script. Ronnie, you're an actor. You're the president, yes, but read the script. It's not your way, it's our way. Or else. And a shot was fired across his bow. Yes, this battlefield that we're on now, not including Afghanistan and Iraq, of course. It's the quiet war that I'm talking about that rages incessantly in different battlefields or arenas. This war, for example, takes place on one battlefield called the media. That's the battlefield I fight on. There's another battlefield called the Department of Justice, or the courts of the land, the judicial arena. It occurs in the schools of your nation, in the schools of the world through the indoctrination of the children. Though the manner by which the brains of children are manipulated to make them into good and proper soldiers for this war in the coming years is the reason. It occurs also, this quiet war, in the stock exchanges around the world. They're scattered in various places, but are in the form of areas of society. The conflict occurs in the law enforcement areas, between different agencies, between different levels of jurisdiction, whether it's province-wide, statewide, federal, national. The battle rages between people from different jurisdictions. There's a conflict and dispute that rages between various companies in the business world. But it is more than business itself. It's vying for power and is seeking to gain power over competitors or to push certain ones out of the running. These are part of the war. The companies in business that become the strongest during the next few years may be given an opportunity to play with the big boy companies. Otherwise, they're likely to be shut and sold. There's also the political war. Essentially, if people truly understand what is meant by the word political, all it really means is a popularity contest. Essentially, that is actually what political correctness is. The position that is most popular, the position that is promoted as being the most popular. If people can begin to understand a certain position as being politically correct and buy into that political correctness, they're seeking to be popular on the agenda of that which is promoted as the politically correct or popular position. There are a lot of people who are not politically correct, who take a position that is less than popular, whose position is described as unpopular. Many of these people described as unpopular will find that gradually their position becomes less and less popular because the masses want to be on the right side of politics. They want to be politically correct. If, for example, if they're told by the polls or by the media, another one of the battlefields, that it is politically correct to think a certain way and politically incorrect to think something else, then they are likely to switch their positions accordingly. This tells you that there's a war going on to convince people about what to think. The taking of polls is a huge weapon of the Illuminati to wage the propaganda war. Part of the machinery that persuades people to take a position, which lines them up to give power to one group or to another. That's the usage the Illuminati have for polls. The elections in Canada and the United States couldn't be a better example of what I'm talking about. The polls. You pick up the newspaper, you read it, and you go, oh, my guy's losing. I'm not even going to go vote. Forget about it. As if your vote had counted anyway. Oh, by the way, when you do vote, don't vote by scribbling on your ballot and spoiling it because it's not counted. Just throw it in the garbage. Don't do that. Vote the way I vote. You know who I vote for every election? So far. No confidence. Just exactly how Paul Martin, the Prime Minister of Canada, lost to Stephen Harper. No confidence. You also have that power. Use it. Here's what you do. When the scrutineer hands you your ballot and you're all checked out and ready to go and everything's fine and he hands you the ballot, don't touch it. As a matter of fact, step back one pace. One step backwards and say, I refuse this ballot. Then they'll probably have to get on the telephone and check out what the hell to do next. Because I've educated a few scrutineers on this. On voting no confidence for a couple of 3 elections now. Well, we've had 3 elections in 4 years. We're going to have. So no confidence is this. If you don't mark it, if you don't accept it, they mark it as no confidence, and it goes as a vote. A vote for who? For none of the people that are on the ballot. It's basically your way, your power, your way of saying, get somebody else's name on the damn ballot. I don't like any of them. Go get somebody else that doesn't belong to the same family that's been in the political job for generation after generation after generation. Give me something new. Give me someone who is naive and stupid and thinks he's got a chance to change something, instead of someone that's going to go in there and just toe the party line and do what the Illuminati ask. So vote no confidence. So can you imagine if 1 million people voted no confidence, what a powerful message you would be sending. Get somebody else's name on here. You know what they're doing now? It's so ridiculous. They're taking people that used to be in one party and throwing them over, and he belongs to this other party now. Oh my God, man. He who stands for nothing falls for anything. Vote no confidence. Refuse the ballot. I refuse this ballot. then they have to stick it in this box that is not spoiled, because that goes in the garbage. It's a ballot that was refused. How about if there were 1 million of them this election? What a great message. Because I'm sure no one likes the choices that we have here, say, for instance, in this Canadian election. This is all redundant, really, because your vote really doesn't count. But you can still say something, because they're going to put in who they're going to put in anyway. Basically, this Canadian election is an exercise in, you've test drove this guy called Stephen Harper. Now give him a damn majority so he can lock Prime Minister office's door, never talk to the media, and do whatever the hell he wants. Well, actually, to whatever the Illuminati bosses tell him to do, because that's what he'll do. And that's what's going to happen. He'll come out with a majority. I can tell you that right now. Space, back with more in a minute. This is AM 640 in the View from Space.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the right to free speech while he still can on AM 640.
I'm the guy that calls Space. It's View from Space on AM 640 with a couple of addresses. You can contact me at spaceman at 640toronto.com is one, and space at 640toronto.com is the other one. So I've been talking about politically correct on the battle fields that are in different places in the judiciary, in the media. There's another one. It's the one I fight. And they're all on all kinds of levels. It's the Hegelian dialectic of pitting one against another to cause the chaos. And chaos, of course, creates change. And change to what? A new world order. Because all of the cases that come up that change laws and things are designed specifically to go in that direction. Centralizing of everything, centralizing of power, centralizing of it all. That's where we're headed for the New World Order. The words of the global elite actually truly describe the masters behind the controlling factors that are promoting this war against the masses, against humanity all over the earth. I've done a lot of research on the so-called secret societies, and they are from an underground society that influenced Adolf Hitler, and other people under their control have contributed to the New World Order path in various ways, and these people from this underground society are related to the Aryan race, who have also been seen and described by people who have claimed to have been abducted by UFOs. Among them are the Khazars, who were a Nordic tribe who used to live in the Volga River, taking taxes from passing boats, sometimes robbing the passing boats of money, creating a kind of society that taxed people and used money for usury purposes of acquiring great wealth, meaning lending money at high interest. Sound familiar? A lot of researchers have studied these areas to believe that the underground society is more than just mere words or a metaphorical phrase. There is actually a belief that there is a city underground in the area between China and Tibet. Some call this city Shambhala. Adolf Hitler spoke of having seen the Superman, and his eyes were frightening, and I was afraid. Those are the words in describing it from Adolf Hitler. Some believe that these extraterrestrials, who have long lived underground in this area, these are the ones who supposedly have the ultimate control, the ultimate power over the leaders of the world. I believe that myself. I don't call them extraterrestrials. I call them demons, the fallen angels, the Nephilim, and their leader is Satan himself, as the Illuminati call him Lucifer, the god of light. It is Satan's purpose to set this world up so that it becomes part of the draconian Federation. The Federation that is controlled out of Draco, using influence from Orion, Draco, and Zeta Reticula, the stars in the Orion constellation. These extraterrestrials working through the Aryan race who have influenced us and also influenced the demons in the underground city. These Illuminati families who have accepted the job of bringing this Earth in alliance with the Draco Federation and the Orion Empire, who are the allies of the galactic war that is occurring on this planet. The Rothschilds' household to this day has a place setting at their dinner table reserved for Satan himself. It's always empty, but set at each evening meal. The big picture on the more global level is an effort to create a one-world government that is capable of controlling all levels of society through manipulation of individuals, through their ability to buy and sell, and also through the control of health care, through the education and mind controls available to them through different electronic devices and media, and also through the tattoos that will eventually be placed on every person's hand or forehand, just as mentioned in the book of Revelation in the King James Version of the Bible. See, the book of Revelation in the King James Version is being used as kind of a blueprint for the world domination. It's no coincidence that the book of Revelation is being used as kind of a blueprint. It's a fact that the book of Revelation was originally a writing of the Templars. The Templars, having discovered the pattern or plan of alien conquest of a planet, put this information into the book of Revelation. And if you examine it, you will notice that it speaks of the dragon. Instead of calling it dragon, they say the word Draco, the constellation Draco. So instead of reading about the mark of the beast, think of it as a tattoo. You can see how the Templars changed the words in this book in an attempt to expose the plans of the extraterrestrials to the masses. It became inserted in the New Testament almost accidentally. There were people who were very much opposed to it being in the New Testament. Catholicism. But because it had some useful value in helping to control Christians, it was inevitably and eventually decided to be put in as a means of coercion. So if you do not follow Christianity properly, you will be doomed. There is a brainwashing going on at many different levels and in so many areas of society that people simply want to back off, forget all about it, and not even think about it, and just concentrate on the day-to-day hardships of daily life. God knows daily life is hard enough without all this, they say. It's tough for them to cope with everyday problems of life, and for some, there is no one capable working to support the family. People are having greater and greater difficulty surviving, and so they have no time to worry about spiritual pursuits or the spiritual threats or the threats of extinction of their freedoms. They only want to know how to get another meal for their kids. Each day they go through the same concern with the same problem. How do I make ends meet? You're put there on purpose. That's how you're controlled. This is a major problem for a lot of people, and they're open to anything that the government tells them. They don't have time to question it. They don't have time, or sometimes even the interest, to pursue any search for truth. This is a time when people absolutely need to help each other right now. It's a time when the have-nots are being told, we're stripping you of what little you have left. So unless you learn how to make more money yourself. You are not getting anything more from the government. The welfare programs are being cut off to the poor, while the enhancements are going to the major corporations. They are being given a greater and greater amount through tax cuts and through handouts and bailouts. Right now, there is still a semblance of compassion from higher officials in government. There's still that pretense of caring about the masses. But once the New World Order is in place, there won't be any need to be sympathetic or to appear compassionate to anyone at all. I believe there's a time approaching, very quickly, soon. If the Illuminati has its way, there will be a global government that reaches into every home, dictates what you do, what you have, what you eat, what you see, what you read, what your job will be. They may even separate parents from children, break up families deliberately in order to have better control and to have less motivation amongst individuals. If you do not have your family with you, what motivates you to do anything but obey and survive? If they can break up the family unit, they have more control over the families. Because they're no longer a family, they are individuals, and individuals are very easily controlled. It's called divide and conquer. It's the oldest trick in the book. There's also soon to be new forms of biological warfare that destroys through disease, starvation, plague, so that the population of the earth can be reduced after the work has been completed that slave labor brings. And you can't tell me slave labor ain't bringing it to you now. If you've gone to Walmart, you are guilty as charged. Oh, but the prices are so low. You're contributing to slave labor. Just keep on. Keep on doing it. And soon you will be part of the slave labor force. There may be a time wherein people can remain alive as long as they work hard. Just as it was in Nazi Germany, many of those who later became part of the millions who died did remain alive as long as they were capable of working. But the time eventually came when they no longer could function as a slave, and they were starved or put to death in some other way. Space, back with more in a minute. This is AM 640.
The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640 and A View from Space. Yes, there are a lot of people who will still say life is so comfortable for me right now. I don't want to put myself at risk, messing up my comfort zone. I don't want to disrupt the comfort of my home. I have everything just the way I want it after working so long, so much of my life to get this way. I don't want to speak out or do anything that would cause the thought police to come to my door. That's the type of intimidation that the Illuminati count on to keep people in line, so that the silence eventually allows the ones who kept silent to become victimized without a sound on their behalf. We're in a quiet war right now, where the screams aren't heard at this moment. The gunshots on the streets are not heard at this moment. It is a war that takes its victims now, but the victims do not even recognize that have been taken. And the screams won't come for maybe months or even years from now. But they will scream and say, "What happened to my country? Where is my world? Where's my family? How did all this come to be?" The screams are delayed. The gunshots are delayed. But the controls are being put in place quietly, silently, thoroughly, and completely, so that no one will be able to wiggle or move when the strings are tightened. The masses, once the New World Order is in place, being divided into ultra-poor and ultra-rich by getting rid of the middle class, will be much easier to manipulate and manage by the ultra-rich Illuminati. This is our situation that is affecting the world in which we now live. You can continue to ignore the realities. You can continue to listen to the fairy tales promoted by the controlled media. But the realities continue to exist, whether you believe it or not. Now, there's still a lot of people who believe the Illuminati-controlled media version of reality. It's all too easy to believe in the media version. It's more pleasant to believe in a friendly government, that your representatives in government actually represents you. And it's more pleasing to believe that there are no conspiracies, that everything is exactly the way it's portrayed on television. And these people will look at those who believe in conspiracies as though they're crazy. And those who understand the conspiracies look at the people who don't as though they're naive. Wishful people, wishful thinking people who believe in La La Land. There are so many right now in your country walking around with their heads in the sand, but who have a very snobbish attitude about it, and look down at those who are groveling in the dirt, or whose friends have been killed, or whose actions and studies and research has led them to recognize the world is not the pleasant place they say it is, but could be better if we would simply all work together to make it so. Today, right now, I'm speaking about the beast now, as I said I would, deeper into the show and the earlier part of tonight's A View from Space on AM 640. In Geneva, Switzerland, there is a computer, a giant supercomputer. It's the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN for short. It's situated in the northwest suburb of Geneva, on the Franco-Swiss border. It's 17 miles of a circle of technology. You've heard about it just lately. This computer is immense. Tim Berners-Lee is one of the head scientists at CERN, the man who invented the World Wide Web in 1990. He is closely associated with another more sinister project. See, Tim Berners-Lee was the man who come up with the idea of the switcher to connect, say, my box here that's underneath my desk to that box at your house that's by your feet, probably. so that our two boxes can talk to one another. That was Tim Berners-Lee contribution, which actually invented the World Wide Web. The switcher that could connect one box to another box so that each box could talk to each other. When they saw the Illuminati, when they saw what Tim Berners-Lee brought, they immediately said to Tim, Timmy, you've got to do this. Fix me up a system that has all of the boxes in the world connected to one place, one central location. And give me the ability at my central location to go in anybody's box and look around anytime I want to, whether they're logged online or not. As long as they're on the World Wide Web, I can look in their box from my centralized location. I don't want to hook up all the boxes in the world to that centralized location. I want to hook up all the banks to that central location. And I want to have my central location in Geneva, Switzerland, where I can control every single piece of information that anyone peruses. Well, that's exactly what's happened. And it came out when they said that they had tested the CERN Large Hadron Collider, and that it worked fine. Then there was a problem, they stated later. This is September 9th they did this. Then they said there was a problem with the magnetos in it that gave them quite a problem and set them back a couple of months. This is the machine that they said when they do test it to find the God particle that could create a black hole that could suck the whole world into it. Well, you know what? They did create it. But the black hole isn't going to suck in matter, it's going to suck in cash. Because you see, September 9th is when that came out with the Apple CEO, September 9th, and Apple equipment is used at CERN. Apple equipment comes out with the nanotechnology iPod. All right, nanotechnology is 1/1000th of a centimeter. All kinds of information can be stuck on that little tiny chip. So you can imagine 17 miles of computer technology, nanotechnology, that can save every single text you ever did, every single email you ever sent, every single website that you've ever visited, for how long, and everything that you've ever done online will be recorded and saved on nanotechnology. So your entire life will be saved on it. Soon, they're going to flip the switch after cash is killed. And that computer, the beast, is going to run the system of the electronic funds transfer system. There'll be no money. There'll only be the computer to buy and sell. And of course you will be given a number, and in that number, in the CERN beast computer, will have your account. That's what I believe they're working on now at CERN. CERN, by the way, if you haven't seen their logo, is a stylized 666. Just at your front of your computer right now, your Mac or your PC, just Google CERN and click on images, and you'll see the stylized 666, which is their logo. It is now tied to all the banks of the world This computer is the beast. Its self-programming has the capacity for housing a number for every person on this planet. These numbers are prefixed by the three numbers 666. The banking system is prepared to shift their economic banking system into a computerized system wherein all people would use a card and a number rather than cash. Cash is out. Checks are out. Credit is out. This is the new world order's monetary system, controlling system. This is the electronic funds transfer system I was speaking about earlier. The 10 regions of the world will have it, just as they had 10 regions of the world in Atlantis. The computer, the supercomputer, the beast, now has the capability of being tied into all computers on Earth, and very soon, in each of the soon-to-be set-up 10 economic areas of the world. And in those computers, in each of the major banks, in the major cities, that the local stores, many of these are already tied into those computers within those cities. The plan calls for a crisis to occur, whereby all people will be required to receive a government number. A short time later, these people will be tattooed with invisible ink. It'll be put on their hand or put on their forehead. This tattoo will then replace the credit card, and people will be expected to use this number for every single purpose, every single transaction, every ID check. And the number would be their identification number from birth until death. The arguments will, of course, be strong for this. It will stop crime. There'll be no more credit crunches. It'll speed up service in the supermarkets. People will no longer receive payroll checks. You'll just simply have the payment deposited in your bank account, and you'll never need to write a check, and will simply present their number wherever they go, and the computers will deduct the purchase from their account. What a wonderful system. Coming soon. Space, back with more in a moment. This is AM 640 and a view from space.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with a view from space on AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is AM 640 and a view from space. Yeah, the arguments will be pretty strong for a central computer that every single machine in the world is routed to, so that there is a central location, a central area, which is actually total 100% control, isn't it? But they will have great excuses. Stopping crime. Wow, that's huge. I mean, think about what they're proposing. No cash, no credit, no cards. You don't even need a wallet now. When you think about it, you don't even need a wallet because you will have your number tattooed on your body. So, ID theft? Thing of the past. Forget about it. Nobody would break into your home, steal your money. There would be no rogue nations making secret deals with arms dealers. Because it would all be tracked and traced on the beast. Well, somebody moved a huge amount of money. Let's go check, see what happened there. What they received for that. There wouldn't be any of that. And standing waiting in a supermarket line, if I told you you'd just buzz through with your hand waved over top of a machine to just glance it and walk out, I mean, it'd be virtually no lineup. No checks to write. No cards to lose. Calling the bank and hurrying up. Freeze my account. My card's been stolen. It eliminates all of that. So you can see the argument be quite strong for a central supercomputer to run the entire world. But the problem is absolute power corrupts absolutely. And there is no person on earth that can be fair and benevolent. Because of greed or the lust for power. This has been tested and tried in various places, and it's now ready to be presented in full scale all over the world as soon as the crash of the currencies takes effect. And I believe that's beginning now. People who are aware, people who think for themselves, should ask themselves, who created the money? Why do they create it? And how? Why can I not create money like they can? Who pays them? Do they simply create money out of nothing? The answer to that, by the way, is yes. Why must I have a number to belong to a system I didn't create? What are the motives of these people in creating this kind of a system? How much power do they really desire? What kind of controls are placed on them to prevent them from misusing their power of control over all the people of the world? Who would have this number? And what could be done to reverse this action once it got going? I'll tell you now, once this action is established, anyone who objects is going to find themselves being called a criminal. Because George W. said it in his 2001 September 12th address on television. If you're not for us, you're against us. No middle ground. Pick a side. People who who become part of this system will find that every book he or she reads, every type of food he or she eats, every item they buy will be computerized and saved with their nanotechnology. And there will be no privacy left. The beast will know everything you read, everything you eat, everything you buy, and everything will be digitally stored and saved for reference. You see, if they only want a select few in their system, you have to find out a way to find who is desirable, who fits in your system, and who doesn't. This is the perfect trap. It finds out exactly who you are, what your profile is. Can you imagine just how much Facebook alone will tell about you? And that generation who uses that in MySpace and things like that, those are the ones that implicitly trust the government. Because they just put out their information online for all to see, and they don't think it matters. But it does. They can whip up an instant profile of you, whether you fit or not, into their new system. So they won't even have to ever interview you, ever see you. They can just go through your file, go through your box, and find out if you're one of the lucky ones, or if you're not. Yes, it's a very good system to be able to decide which person you want in and which ones you don't. Yep, everything digitally stored and saved for reference. The beast will have a complete, all-seeing eye placed on your life. If this happens, the greatest trials and tribulations ever seen or thought of even will come upon this planet and will be experienced by many. People will not be able to buy from one another without going through their account at the computer. The 5% tax that they'll have will in a short time be raised to 10. And that 10% tax in a short time will be raised to 15. There's a method to their madness here. The final plan is that all, and I mean all people, shall give 25% or more of their earnings in their purchasing and sales tax. Their energies will be deducted at a rate of 25% for their purchases. This then begins creating a greater and greater difference in classes until there are the super rich, who are all powerful, and the bureaucratic rulers who are beneath them, and the masses of slaves who do the work, the bidding, and answers the whims of the rulers. So you see how they're going to put a great chasm in between those that have and those that don't have. You could probably tell me right now, if the computer was switched on now at CERN and we were already operating on that system, you could tell me whether you're in or out, I bet. It's the Spaceman. View from space. More still to come on AM 640 about this brave new world.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Well, I'd say it would be fair to call these extreme times. I mean, you have people walking around, or the experts, saying that this financial crisis is the worst the world's seen since the 1929 crash. And then I take a look at who's running the Federal Reserve in America that controls their economy and prints their money and sets their interest rates, in other words, controls their monetary system. I see a guy by the name of Ben Bernanke, whose forte, whose expertise lies in the 1929 crash. That really began the Great Depression that spread around the world that gave us WW2. Is this now what we're seeing coming to pass? The second time in one lifetime? Because there are people that were alive in 1929 that saw all this happen. Are we about to repeat the same ritual to get to the same result? This time, WW3. Because one of the founders, they say, of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, said it would take 3 world wars to bring the world back to the position where they would back a one world government. Because after all, you have to give up a lot of things for a one world government. You have to give up your border. You have to give up your right to make your own decisions. Your sovereignty has to go. Be people outside of your own country calling the shots within your country. I know there's a lot of people walking around already that are saying, you know what, one world government, that's perfect, that would get rid of all the wars. Oh yeah? That would start the war against you. Look at how things are going now. All your freedoms being taken away, but for your own good. And once the Merovingian sorcerer kings take away a freedom, you'll never get it back. You will never see that freedom again. People say if there's a one world government, you know what? It would be a good thing. Because we wouldn't have a whole bunch of politicians coming around promising this and that, and then doing the opposite of what they say. Yes, this is your alternative to the freedom you have already known, and is given to you by these money changers as part of your future world. This year is the beginning of the great drive by the Illuminati to tighten the nets around the minds of men, to destroy constitutions of nations, to begin tightening up their controls, their deceptions, and to confuse and manipulate the masses. No original thinkers, please, in a New World Order. No original thinkers. We all should be on the same page. We all should be thinking the same thing. No, I had the good fortune of traveling many parts of this world, working in England, working in Germany, traveling other countries. And I saw those other countries for the way they were originally. Well, not originally, but I mean, Germany was Germany and England was England. And I was in North Africa, and they live differently. They dress differently. The buildings are different. Today, if you travel around the world, you got the same McDonald's on the corner. You got the same steel and glass buildings downtown Casablanca. It's all the same. No matter where you go, all the cities look the same. The buildings are all the same. Because all of the buildings are built by the same money. So they built it all up. And it's just sad to see all those great things of the past pass away and everything getting this new. And new is not necessarily better, but getting this new look. This steel and glass, sanitized, ugly architecture of the 21st century. This will all be happening very soon with intensity because the Illuminati's energy is focused on a central location toward the beast, not toward the left or toward the right as politicians talk about, nor toward races, nor toward communism or capitalism or this thing they call democracy, which is really corporate fascism, but toward the beast. Those who use money for power, control, and manipulation were programmed by the occult forces back in the days of Atlantis to bring about the one world slave state. These people are behind the scenes today, and many of the wealthy and powerful elite who support them are totally unaware of this programming and are themselves victims of this occult programming. It's just the way they were brought up. The Illuminati believe approximately 500,000 years ago the Galactic Confederation cordoned off 6 planets in the area of Orion for they were spreading war and violence throughout the inhabited planets, as the story goes from the Illuminati. And these planets, over long periods of time, continued in their struggles to conquer one planet after another. Doesn't it sound like Star Trek to you? Because it's meant to. That was the programming they put into you after years of watching that TV show. Where do you think Gene Roddenberry got his ideas from? I've just told you. The rogue states that we have in the world in Star Trek are those planets that are out of line with the Federation. The Federation is the New World Order, where everyone is taken care of and everyone is fair and it's all wonderful. It's programming you for what I've been talking about tonight. The Illuminati are trying to convince most people that the Earth is essentially in the grips of a war between planets, and has been for 12,000 years, and at an intense level. And prior to that, a less intense level for approximately 60,000 years. And the karmic debt of planet Earth is almost totally erased so they can start fresh and new. That's what they believe. These people from other realms have the capability of transcending or transmuting certain vibratory rates in the electromagnetic spectrum and traveling from place to place in the universe. So the Illuminati believe. This relates to what has been called Hades and Celestia. Those that know as Celestia as being capable of extending high levels of energy to certain people upon this plane for healing purposes. Yet these people are supposedly not allowed to interfere with the destiny of anybody on this planet unless requested, unless invited. The two sides that are fighting, which are the forces of Celestia, of light, and the forces of Hades, darkness, are not competing with each other over the human soul, but rather have an agreement with each other. Who will seek and not to be given all that which would gratify their personal lust and greed and power and desires. Those who would serve others and love others by the agreement would be allowed to enter into that state called Celestia, and the ones who love darkness will be allowed to enter Hades. That's how the Illuminati look at things. This has been A View from Space. Coast to Coast next. I'm Space. I'm out.